I want to thank you, President Biden, for hosting this NALS, the first since 2016 when I welcomed the then leaders to Ottawa. We are three countries with extremely strong ties between our people, with our visions and values for the future strongly united.
Okay, those were just some of the opening remarks from the Prime Minister earlier today at the North American Leaders Summit. How successful was the visit to Washington? What does it mean, if anything, for the future of the Canada-U.S. relations? It's Thursday. I'm here with At Issue, Chantal Hébert, Althia, and in for Andrew tonight, Wherry. Good to see everybody. Appreciate you being here. Chantal, I'll start with you. It's, I suppose, already something that the three leaders can get together because it has been a long time for all sorts of reasons. What did you make of the Prime Minister's visit and who he chose to meet with and the kind of messaging that he had?
Two things. The first, it's going to be complicated, and those complications stem from Joe Biden's own position with Congress. It's a very tenuous hold that the Democrats have, and he does not have a lot of leeway. The other message I got from it was that Canada has come around to the view that the approach that they took to the Trump era needs to be in place or be put back in place for the Biden era, because there is only so much that Justin Trudeau will achieve. Talking to Joe Biden, the pressure on Congress is going to be essential.
Althia, and some of that is, of course, about this electric vehicle tax credit we've talked a lot about, but your thoughts?
Yeah, he was asked about that. The Prime Minister was, as in his meeting with the President, and I think that the answer that Justin Trudeau was hoping for was not what the President told reporters, which is basically, well, the bill's in front of Congress and we don't know what it's going to look like yet, so we'll talk about that after. Well, talking about that after seems like it might be a little bit too late, but we're hearing behind the scenes that, well, there are things the administration can do to carve out an exemption for Canada. But I guess the first lesson would be we're a little bit late on this. I mean, if this proposal came out of the powerful Ways and Means Committee while we were in an election campaign on September 15th, it is really important to Joe Biden's left-wing Democratic base to move forward on protectionist policies like this, and where the conflict between the Democrats exists is not on the Buy American provisions, it's on whether or not it should only apply to union-made vehicles. Yeah. So that's interesting. The other thing I think that's important to note is that this is a full court press from the federal government. The trade minister is there, the public safety minister is there. He wasn't in the meetings, but he was there. Chrystia Freeland, the deputy prime minister, is there. The foreign affairs minister is there. All the the big wigs are there. And I don't know if that is part of hey, we're so tired of COVID and now we can finally do diplomacy in person, let's all go down together. But it is interesting to note that at the end of the day, so many people have gone down and we're not coming back with lots of stuff in hand.
Aaron, your thoughts?
Yeah, I did. The fact that there were so many ministers going down, that there were meetings with, Congress and Senate leaders, that is pretty reminiscent of the Trump years and how Canada approached these things. But, otherwise, this kind of feels like a return to the pre-Trump normal, which is as much as people may have kind of tricked themselves into thinking that, once Donald Trump went away, that everything would be kind of tickety-boo again and Canada and the United States would get along famously. It's, that's not really what history shows you. And this kind of feels like a return to the way things have always been, which is that the United States does something, in this case, the EV tax credit, and then Canadian officials have to go down to Washington and carefully explain to them why that's a really bad thing for us and why, something that's bad for us would be bad for them. And so, I think this is just kind of it does feel like a bit of just kind of getting back to normal Canada-U.S. relations. I don't think the EV tax credit thing is going to be fixed quickly, but I think the bigger question coming out of this is, for as long as Biden or a Democrat is in the White House, can the Trudeau government make some progress on North American issues, clean energy, the climate change, and really build something that can kind of last past these 4 years?
I sense Chantal has one more thing to say.
Still, there is a big difference. There are things that Bill Clinton or Barack Obama could do on the phone with the prime minister that Joe Biden cannot do, because as he knows, when he is asked, he doesn't know. the outcome because he does not have as many levers that he can use in Congress as his predecessors, and that makes it different.
Okay, I want to do a very quick round on what the heck is happening inside the Conservative Party. This move by Senator Denise Batters to start a petition to begin the process to remove Erin O'Toole. Erin O'Toole boots her from caucus and tries to quell again this turmoil. Is this the end or the beginning of this? Do you think, Althia?
Too early to say. I think it was a shot across the bow to everybody who, all those kind of 30 members or so of caucus who are agitating. Now, they have support for more people from more caucus members than those who are vocal in their criticism, shall you say. But then as we talked about last week, he appointed like 80 people to the shadow cabinet. You have to expect that in giving them such a plump position, that he got their support. And, you had the story circulating probably by the OLO earlier this week that Mr. O'Toole had secured at least 70 MPs who were ready to boot out any dissenting caucus member. And I think that has put a chill on caucus. That is not to say that the grassroots are not agitating, because they are.
Erin, how are you reading this and reading it for Mr. O'Toole's leadership?
It feels like the big question now is sort of how many people does Denise Batters really have behind her, and are they willing to speak up and come forward? It does feel, I think, what Althia said, that O'Toole sort of offered a challenge here of kind of like, okay, it's, put up or shut up. If you want to challenge my leadership, go for it. But it's easy to kick one person out of caucus. It's harder if it gets to be a dozen people that he has to kick out of caucus. And I think what's also interesting here is just the way Denise Batters is attacking O'Toole, which is kind of really picking up on the kind of contradictions he's laid out for himself, and really kind of hitting him with what he hit Peter MacKay with during the leadership, this idea that he's taken the party to the mushy middle. And I think that speaks to sort of the larger structural issues that this party has to come to grips with in terms of exactly what it's going to offer the Canadian public going forward.
It also doesn't, you understand why he did it, Chantal, but it also doesn't look great to shut down dissent, because you would presumably, particularly in the Conservative Party, want different viewpoints to be allowed to be voiced.
Well, for one, but for two, it's easy enough to show a senator the door, but I'm not sure Mr. O'Toole seriously believes Denise Batters woke up one morning on our own thinking, and let's just do this, guys, this would be interesting. So what happens when he needs to show the door to people who are MPs and who may be actually part of his inner cabinet? I've watched enough depth of the 1,000 cuts of opposition leaders to know that those, the longer they go on, usually don't end well for that leader.
All right, let's move on to one more topic, kind of a big one. Next week, Parliament returns for the first time in, I think it's close to 5 months. Of course, there was an election, and the government's going to lay out its priorities in the throne speech on Tuesday. What should we be watching for? Chantal, Althia, Erin, back for another round. Erin, you can start us off on this one. I guess the immediate question before we get to throne speech Tuesday is what the heck is going to happen in the House? Are we going to get a speaker? There's all sorts of procedural things that have to happen there, and this ongoing question about the vaccine mandate.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first question is how they're going to function, whether they're going to move to a hybrid system, and whether all Conservative MPs are going to be able to be in attendance. Before the Denise Batters flare-up, that was the big question for Erin O'Toole, was how many members of his caucus were vaccinated, and whether they'd all be able to attend. And I think that will add to Erin O'Toole's troubles, I think, next week. But I think the shift now, though, will go to the government and how well they can respond to the attacks that they're inevitably going to face in the first week. And I think whether we can get a sense of, regardless of whether there's a Liberal or NDP deal to be made here, whether they're going to have some ability to get legislation through in a relatively easy way, or at least better than they had last spring when things in Parliament were pretty bad, whether the election has sort of cleared them some space to kind of make some real moves, because they do have, between the platform they ran on in 2019 and the platform they ran on a few months ago, they have a lot to do over the next few months.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine that things would be as difficult as, they weren't even that difficult. The government thought they were difficult, but I would imagine things would be easier, Althia, than when we left them, if only because nobody has any intention of going into another election. Is that naive of me to think that?
I would say it's not naive at the moment, but the reason it's going to be easier is because there are no committees to cause them headaches. And that's what they really disliked from the last sitting. So we're not going to get that really until February. Aaron's right. The big question will be obviously who's the speaker on Monday. And then if any conservatives who are not vaccinated try to go to Parliament and make a point of personal privilege or try to make an issue out of that. There are very few conservatives who actually are not vaccinated. I think the big show, though, is obviously going to be the throne speech on Tuesday. And there, I think it will be interesting to see if there's any language around pharmacare, for example, or a complete employment insurance reform, which are things that the NDP have suggested that they would like to see. And so if there are any olive branches that the government is clearly giving New Democrats to kind of bring them on side on things that they want to get done quickly. So time allocation and closure, these obviously are parliamentary procedures, but they would signal an intent to cooperate perhaps a little bit more enthusiastically than in the spring.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Does the throne speech show that there's a willingness to cooperate, Chantal?
Okay, so I'm going to play reality check here.
Do it.
There is no scenario under which the throne speech does not get a vote that saves the government from going back to an election. That's not happening, one. Two, when Canadians watch this parliament, and hopefully the government and the opposition parties are aware, there are two issues, because you cannot work in a vacuum from reality here. What's happening in BC has made climate change, but also public safety, a top issue for many Canadians. And to have a throne speech about pharmacare while this is happening, good luck, people. One. Two, a 16-year-old kid got shot in Montreal this week. So have a nice strong speech, but gun control and gun regulations, big time topic in real life. Now, climate change, gun control, not great for the Conservatives.
Yeah, but it does.
I think all those things can be in the throne speech, though. I don't think one precludes the other. And if anything, I think what we've seen in the last week, which has been really nice, is actually the emergency preparedness minister reaching out to Conservative MPs, the local MPs in their riding. Like there seems to be some goodwill. Obviously, it took a natural disaster to get there, but there are signs this might actually not be toxic.
Chantal,
and my point is that the Trump speech thing is probably going to be live for 24 hours.
Right.
And not that long in the minds of most Canadians.
Yeah, I think my point, and I'll get Aaron to end on this, would be too that what is happening in BC may indeed provide a bigger window of opportunity for the government that seems to want to move aggressively on climate change.
Yeah, I would not expect the throne speech to be thrilling or memorable. They generally, from this government, haven't been. Although I think Althia is right. It will be interesting to see if there are notes in there that could speak to some kind of cooperation with the NDP. But yeah, look, British Columbia has put climate change right in front of people, and there is a lot of work to do, not only to reduce emissions, but to deal with adaptation, flood mapping, getting ready for the storms and the wildfires that are going to come. And this government has signaled that it wants to step on the gas pedal and move aggressively on those things, more aggressively than it already has. So there is an opening seemingly here for them to do that. And now they just sort of need to actually start putting some action, some proposals in front of Parliament and moving things along. And they've got, as Althia says, a few months here to kind of get going before committees maybe start causing them problems. So we'll see how ready they are to hit the ground running, I guess, in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you all so much, Chantal, Althia, and Aaron.